Gavite Games.
Hello world and welcome to Gavite Games. I don't want to do this. Okay, as you can tell by that kick-ass intro, I'm reviewing Final Fantasy X and 9. To give this review some perspective, before now, I've never played a JRPG other than Pokemon. And I'm more likely for the sole fact I like the Pokemon TV series and the card game rather than the JRPG itself. Don't get me wrong, I really like the Pokemon video game, it's really, really good. Upon reflection now, I've had to look back at it, and it's still a really good game. I'm just one of those things I've never really realised what I was playing at the time, but it is a JRPG style. So that's the only introduction I've ever had to the JRPGs. I've never played anything else like that. And then I played this. Full disclosure, the only reason I picked this up was because I've been watching a lot of Spoony stuff and he hates this game, so I wanted to see what it was all about. So I played the first hour and a half of this game. I say played. I sat down and watched a fucking movie where occasionally I'd have to move the movie character forward down a fucking corridor to make the whole thing continue. And 3 times there was a monster boss fight which was interrupted by the fucking storyline. Fuck this game! It made me not want to play this game ever again. There was never any objective which was clear to me. I had no idea what I was doing. I hated the main protagonist. I couldn't stand what was going on. And I had to watch the intro cinematic twice because when you start the game it starts up and then when you press start it starts up again. Only this time with a fucking fruity narration by this fucking prick. I don't understand why Spoony hates this game now. I am never playing this again. The things I will say, it's never clear what you're meant to do. You're never told explicitly what you're meant to do, and even though you're given like directions of how to do things, for example, you're taught how the sphere grid works, right? But then when you do the little introduction to how the sphere grid works, all the stuff you do in that tutorial is not done to your character until you go back and do it yourself. So that's fucking retarded. You're never given a clear goal at all. I went through this thing in a complete haze of not knowing what the fuck was going on. There was kind of an action-packed scene, but it was interrupted every time by the cinematic carrying on rather than me actually finishing the fucking fight. It introduces plot elements and then completely discards them within like 5 seconds. Like at the beginning of the game, you start and then you're about to play a game of the underwater football thing. And then suddenly the thing attacks, and then shit goes real, and you get given a giant sword, and then there's fighting, and I had no idea what was going on. And then you're teleported 1,000 years into the future after a really weird segment where you're floating in midair, then you land on a platform, and then continue the cinematic. That was completely necessary to the entire fucking plot, I'm sure. And then you end up on a boat, and he was talking a weird, fakey Star Wars language, and then you go underwater and then hit things, and then I don't know.
We're gonna go down there and activate it.
I am not playing that again. I don't know. Goddamn first impression. Thank God it's a first impressions. I would never, in a quadrillion years, want to play this game all the way through. 40 hours of just cinematic, a little bit of fighting, cinematic, awful. Every single voice actor, apart from the narrator at one point, sounds like they've been lobotomized. I swear to God. I cannot stand this. I suffered through the hour and a half. The only reason I managed to make it through was because I was sitting with some friends of mine and we were making fun of the game every single second it was playing. And bear in mind, I've been playing an hour and a half. I've not been introduced to how the magic works, so I don't know what to do there. I've not been introduced to the level up system. I've been shown the sphere grid, and I made one of the selections. So now he can cheer. But other than that, all I've been introduced to is the cinematics, which take forever. the terrible voice acting, which is awful, and the fighting mechanics for people with swords. And the limit breaks.
Get out of my town!
That's about it.
Can't wait to die.
And also, I've done a bit where I stole grenades off fish. So, yeah. But I'm never playing this again. Ever. I wouldn't want to play it through to review. I want to play it through just to torture myself. It's awful. So, imagine my horror when a friend of mine lent me this. The prequel. Final Fantasy 9. So, after I suffered through 10, an hour and a half's worth, I started up this game with so much dread. And I started up. The intro cinematic was fairly short, and then immediately I was in a battle with swords. Instant improvement. How do you go from this, which is okay, to that? One thing that confuses the fuck out of me, though, is as a person who follows, like, convoluted game storylines, I mean, just watch my CNC review if you don't believe me, I usually think there's, like, intercontinuity, but there really isn't for Final Fantasy. This has nothing to do with its sequel, this. 9 and 10 have nothing to do with one another. Then why are they the same series? It doesn't make any sense. It's just like, well, we use the same game mechanics, so we need to put them in the same universe. What? That would mean that BioShock and Fallout 3 and Oblivion are all the same game, and occupy the same universe. It doesn't make any. I was introduced quickly into the fighting, which was a lot more action-packed than it was in 10, because you got like a bar that loads up and then you immediately can attack. So it seemed a lot more fluid than it is in 10, where it's just selected from a drop-down menu. I know you select from a drop-down menu here, but it appears to be more active. And in the hour and a half of gameplay, I was introduced to the swordplay mechanic. There was a brief cutscene, and then I was introduced to the free roaming mechanic, where I ran around the town and did a load of odd missions before I carried on with the storyline. And then I was introduced to how range attack works, and then I was introduced to how the magic works. All within the same span of time, maybe even less than, in fact, than that fucking game, where I was only introduced to one style of fighting, and it was never clear what to do. In this, it's very clear. From the start, your characters are set up, and you're going to kidnap the princess. There we go. Nice, clear objective. You know what you're trying to achieve, and you know why you're trying to achieve it. Okay, so your band of people turn up, pretending to you're in a theatre flying ship. You dock at this castle. You do a performance, and then kidnap the princess, who turned out was escaping anyway, so you know, 2 birds, 1 stone. So, not only are you introduced to a plot quicker, all the gameplay mechanics quicker, and it's just it's just a better game. That's the main thing I'm getting at here. It's not like I expect everything at once. It's an RPG and to introduce things like that. But if in the first hour and a half of gameplay you haven't introduced one of the key elements, the magic, you're doing something wrong, Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy IX knew what it was on about. And it introduced you all the characteristics quickly. And also, all the different characters are introduced in their own special way, where you know what you're talking about. You're introduced to the thief who's on board the ship. You're introduced to the black mage who was running around this thing just trying to get in to see the play. You're introduced to the guard as he's looking for the princess who's been kidnapped. All this stuff is really fun, and it's a good gameplay aspect, and it introduces the characters like whereas an hour and a half of gameplay on this, and I get introduced to 2 characters, one of them being the main character. You think within an hour and a half of gameplay, I'd have introduced to like, I don't know, 3 or 4 more? Or maybe even the magic! So, Final Fantasy IX? Yes, I'm going to continue playing it. Not for a while yet, because it's an RPG and I'll probably get lost in it and then not do my work. Especially because I got to the point in the story where the ship was attacked. The ship had just crashed, so a lot of interesting gameplay is clearly about to happen when wandering around the wood and getting attacked. So, this is a lot more fun than its sequel, and I will be playing it more. So for first impressions, the first hour and a half I played really genuinely entertained me, and I want to continue playing. Unlike that, which basically the first hour and a half of gameplay was a movie where I had to walk a fucker down a corridor and then randomly fight some things which then were cut off because of the fucking cinematic needed to continue for some bizarre bloody reason. I don't want to continue playing that ever. Anyway, that's my end of my first impressions reviews and the end of the first series actually. So I'd like to thank everyone who's liked my videos, commented on them, reposted them on Facebook because I do get a lot of views from people who repost them. I would also like to say genuine thanks to Taz, Tom and Lauren, all of which you've helped me out in one way or another. Please check out Tom and Lauren's websites in the below bar, noisybox.co.uk and lds7.tumblr.com. Do genuinely check them out. They were a really big help for this series, and I hope they will do in the future for the next couple of series. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'm Gavite. See the what the hell?
I'm the magic hacker. This random double follow-up with verbiage is purely focused on single player. Next time we are members. This series is run on commercial software, edited on commercial software. I'm shutting this noobdom down. Goodbye.
No!
Gab.